Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're wrestling with a source that, honestly, it challenges some really fundamental assumptions we have about language, about aging, and what it even means to make sense of the world.
It really does.
We're looking at a pretty powerful excerpt from After the Stages End, Gestalt Processing Across a Lifetime by Jaime Hoerricks.
And it's a remarkable piece. It forces us to take a topic that's usually, locked away in developmental psychology, Gestalt language processing, or GP, and apply it to a whole life.
All the way into adulthood and aging.
Exactly. The core idea here is kind of radical. It's that making meaning. This isn't just resolved neatly when you're a kid. It's constantly rewriting itself, especially during these huge life transitions that we never, ever connect to language development.
Okay, let's unpack that right away, because we need to level set on the terminology. When we talk about Gestalt processing, for anyone who might be new to this, we're talking about a way of learning language that starts with these whole, holistic chunks.
Right. Sometimes called scripts or gestalts. It's not about building word by word, which is the analytic approach.
So you grab the whole feeling, the context
A
first.
little chunk of meaning, yeah. Think of a famous movie line or a phrase you learned in one specific emotional moment. A gestalt processor holds on to that whole thing first, and only much later do they maybe start breaking it down into individual words.
Whereas the analytic processor is the opposite. They start with the Lego bricks, the words, the grammar, and build up from there.
A perfect analogy, yes.
So our mission for this deep dive is to follow where this source takes us, tracing how that Gestalt orientation doesn't go away, but actually reorganizes across a whole lifetime. We're moving way past those simple stage-based charts.
Right.
So if you've ever felt like your language or even just your thinking changed dramatically because of some life event, an illness, a big change, just getting older, you are definitely in the right place.
We're really moving beyond this idea that language is a single journey with a finish line. Instead, we're seeing it as this ongoing adaptive process that's driven by the body and our environment.
So let's start where the source starts, which is by critiquing that standard narrative, because that framing is really the key to the whole argument. The author says that when GP enters the public conversation, it almost always stalks early.
Oh, it does. The whole discussion immediately becomes about children. It's all developmental charts, milestones, interventions.
And those before and after stories.
Exactly. And baked into all of that is this very strong, very implicit promise that GP is just a temporary delay. It's a challenge to get over. Oh, a way station on the route to something more complete, more fluent, more acceptable.
And that acceptable destination is always fluent, word by word, analytic language.
Always.
You see that pressure everywhere, don't you? That drive toward a standardized fluency. But if the whole story is that this is a phase you graduate from, what does that mean for an adult who still thinks and lives this way?
It creates what Hoerricks calls a quiet erasure.
That's a powerful phrase.
It is. If the story says you're meant to grow out of it, then the people who don't they fall out of the narrative. Adulthood, aging, the physical body itself, all of that is treated as totally incidental to how we make meaning.
A quiet erasure. So it's not like an active denial. It's more like a slow fading out of view, because the script assumes the story's over.
Precisely. And the consequence of that is that people who process holistically their whole lives are basically measured against this arbitrary clock. They get framed as unfinished.
Caught mid-trajectory.
Caught mid-trajectory, stalled, or even failed by time itself. It treats their natural way of processing not as a valid orientation, but as a defect. It's like telling an adult, sorry, you stopped developing at stage 3.
Which is so limiting, especially if, like the source says, that whole rigid stage-based framing has never matched my life to begin with.
And that is the absolute pivot point of this whole piece. The assumption that Gestalt orientation has to disappear is just flawed. Hoerricks insists it does not disappear with age. It's an enduring way of being in the world.
So we need to shift our whole framework. We need to move away from fixed stages, which implies, a final destination, and toward this idea of continuous adaptation. We're talking about reorganization.
Reorganization is the word. Gestalt processing reorganizes. It adapts to changing fields. And this is a direct refusal of stage-based narratives because meaning is always moving. It's not static.
Can you give us an analogy for that? Reorganization versus, say, resolution.
Okay, think about remodeling a house. You keep the foundation, the main walls, but you completely gut the inside. You change the flow, the function of every room. That's reorganization.
I see.
Resolution would be knocking the whole house down and building a totally different one from scratch. Analytic language.
Okay, I want to circle back to something you said, because it could sound a bit like jargon. You said GP adapts to changing fields.
Yeah.
What exactly is a field in this context?
That's a great question. We're not just talking about the environment in general. The field here is the immediate situation where meaning gets created. So, yeah, it includes sensory input, the emotional tone. But crucially for this argument, it includes the physical state of the body. And when that field changes dramatically, internally or externally, the old gestalts, those reliable chunks of meaning, might just collapse. They might stop making sense in the new reality.
So, let me see if I have this right. If I use a certain script, a gestalt, to navigate my social life, and then my body goes through a major change, like chronic pain appears or a big hormonal shift.
Yes.
That old script that worked perfectly fine before now doesn't fit my physical reality, and that forces a whole linguistic rewrite.
Precisely. The old comfortable gestalts, which were tied to a certain physical or energetic state, they become unreliable. They might even become unavailable. So the whole system has to reorganize to capture meaning under these new physical rules.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for anyone listening who's just going through a life transition. The source argues that Gestalt processing doesn't just adapt quietly. It actually becomes more visible, not less.
Yes, more visible, especially at moments when our typical analytic models just struggle to explain what's happening.
Why is that?
Well, the analytic model, building word by word, it relies on consistency. It needs cognitive bandwidth, reliable inputs. But when your system is under major stress, physical or otherwise, that analytic assembly can just become too slow, too resource intensive.
So when that efficient step-by-step process breaks down,
this system defaults back to the holistic, efficient chunks. GP is amplified because it's the most efficient tool for the job.
So what are those moments? What are the critical life events where the body sort of insists on being counted and forces this reorganization?
The source lays out a few key periods. There's adolescence, of course, which is just a massive cognitive and hormonal shift. Then transition, so transitioning identity, a career, a major relationship. But the later life examples are the most striking. Menopause, the onset of a chronic illness, and, well, just aging itself.
The inclusion of menopause and chronic illness there is so compelling. We just don't connect those physiological events with language fluency. Wait, can you connect the dots for me? Why would menopause specifically force a linguistic reorganization? That feels like a jump.
It's a critical question. Think about what those events do. They fundamentally alter hormonal stability, cognitive resources, energy levels. Chronic illness often brings constant pain, fatigue, brain fog. These aren't minor things. They are seismic shifts in the internal field.
So the brain's resources are being diverted.
Massively. The brain, which might have had deep reserves to manage the rules of analytic language, suddenly has to divert all that energy to just managing pain or regulating an unstable system.
It sounds like a severe drop in your cognitive budget. If you've only got 50% of your capacity because the other half is busy with survival, the brain picks the cheapest, most effective way to communicate.
Exactly. Analytic language is expensive, cognitively speaking. It takes a ton of effort. Gestalt processing is efficient. When the body imposes new limits, a lower energetic budget, the system leans into what works best under pressure. Those stored, holistic gestalts.
The body is basically telling the brain, we can no longer afford the luxury of building every sentence from scratch.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So these life events, they aren't just changing the content of what we talk about. They're changing the actual mechanism by which we talk.
Absolutely. The common thread through all of them, adolescence, illness, aging, is that they are all times when the body rewrites the conditions under which meaning arrives. The body, in its state of flux, is changing the rules of the game. It's demanding to be counted.
It's not a passive backdrop for language anymore. It's the active, controlling environment.
And that reframes Gestalt processing completely. It's not a clinical issue or a developmental delay. It becomes this necessary, almost ethical response to the body's truth.
Which makes the title, After the Stages End, make perfect sense. The developmental story just keeps going, driven by physical reality.
Yes. And it lets us see GP not as a system that needs fixing, but as a highly sensitive, adaptive mechanism that's expertly responding to the current state of the human being. Fluency isn't some fixed endpoint. It has to be dynamic.
And that brings us toward the end of our deep dive. We started with this conventional wisdom that treats meaning-making as, a problem that gets solved by early adulthood.
Neatly wrapped up.
Yeah. And we've really shifted that view today. We're seeing the Gestalt orientation as a lifelong process of reorganization, driven by the body's insistence on being a central player.
The complexity of a human life just can't be squeezed into a phase chart that stops at age 10. It's kinetic, it's ongoing, it's adapting to illness, to stress, to aging.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener. We've established that the Gestalt way of processing becomes most visible, maybe even most necessary, when the body is going through its most profound changes.
Right, when the analytic system, which needs energy and consistency, kind of buckles under the pressure.
So here's the final thought to leave you with.
If reorganization, this reliance on whole, holistic meaning, is activated by physical necessity, then what fundamental assumptions do we need to question about how we even define completion or fluency? What does it mean for you that the very conditions for making sense of your world are constantly being rewritten by your own changing body? Maybe the most mature state of language isn't some kind of permanent fluency. Maybe it's the constant ability to adapt, to find new gestalts that actually reflect the truth of where you are right now.